Hello everyone, welcome to week 9 of learning C with the help of examples. In this week we will be starting with arrays and strings. Okay, so let's start with arrays first. So the first task that we are going to cover in arrays is to write a program. It will be a simple program to introduce you with the arrays concept, right? So we are going to take the input from the user. Uh, an array number of elements will be taken from the user, and we have to display that in the reverse order. That is the program for the first task in week 9. Okay, so let's begin with this. So let's begin with how to define an array first, right? So the definition of an array is simple. You just start with the way you start with the declaration of a variable, right? So you declare the variable array with its type. Okay, which type of array you want. So you define declare the type, then you give the variable a name. Okay, so let's keep it simple and give it let's say we call it a, right? And then to make this variable an array, all you have to do is give a square brackets, right? And inside the square brackets you have to initialize, you have to provide the size of the array. Okay, so basically what array is, it is used to store values of same type, right? So the program or the compiler should know how much values it is going to store, right? So that's why the size, giving the size is very important. Okay, so let's suppose I can store up to 10 elements. Okay, that does not mean I have to use all the 10, right? So I may use any number of slots. Okay, so basically this array can hold up to 10 elements, right? So once that is done, our first part is done, declaration of the array. Okay, once we have declared the variable, now what we can do is we can start to take the input from the user, right? So to take the input from the user, okay, before that I will just write okay. So once this is done, what I have to do is let's tell the user to enter the elements of the array. Okay, so I've just given a hint to the user that they have to enter the elements of the array. Okay, so once this is done, now what we can do is we can do scanf, right? So we will do scanf as we will normally do. Okay, so scanf %d, and then we can do ampersand sign a of 0. Okay, so what this does is whatever value the user enters, okay, so that one value will be stored into the first memory location. Okay, so basically a has, as you know, a has 10 slots, right? Because we have defined, we have mentioned the size, right? Now the size, the memory locations inside your memory is numbered base starting from 0. Okay, so when I start from 0, since we have 10 memory locations, so it will go up till 9. So our memory address, memory locations will be indexed from 0 to 9. Okay, so 0 is our first location. So if I want to store anything inside the first location, I would do something like this. Okay, so I have to give the name, then the square brackets, and the index at which you want to store, right? So if it is the first, I will put 0 over here, and since you already know scanf, whenever we use, we have to give the address of that particular location, right? So that's why we have added the address symbol, right? So once this is done, this will take the input of the first element. Like that we have let's say I want to take another element, so I can do this in the same scanf or in a different scanf, and I will just change this to 1. Okay, and the third element would be scanf 3, right? Then the fourth element, right? So now you can just see, sorry, I forgot the second element, third element. Okay, so now you can see why I have written this 4 lines, right? So this is not the way you take the input of arrays. Okay, so this will be very tedious. Just imagine you have 100 elements, so it's not feasible to make such 100 lines of codes just to take the input. Okay, so for that reason we will be using a loop to get the input. Right now, to take the input, we have to find out where we can use this loop. Right, so if you look at this, this particular index is changing in every statement, right? And it is changing uniformly. Okay, in the first step it was 0, then it is 1, then it is 2, then it is 3, right? So that means it is like a counter value only, right? So that means that is where I have to use the counter, right? So let's start with a for loop, and I will show you how you can get the input, the same input, but with the help of a for loop, right? So let's take a variable count. Whenever I have a for loop, I will like to have a counter variable. Okay, let's call it I. We will start I from 0, I equal to 0, till I will go up till 9, less than 10, right? Less than 10, that means up till 9. Okay, so this for loop will be running from 0 to 9. Okay, that is because your size of your array was 10, right? So my size of the array is 10, that's why I have gone up till 10, right? Now let's suppose you want if you read the aim carefully, the aim says write a program in C to read n number of values in an array. Okay, so basically the user is going to enter how many values he wants, right? So let's do that also, right? Let's declare a variable called n, and before we enter the elements of the array, let's first ask the user how many elements do you want to enter. Okay, so let's take, let's say, let's say enter number of elements, right? After that I will do a scanf as usual, right? %d, and I will take the input of n. Okay, so n will be your number of elements, right? So now when you know you have n number of elements, that means the array size here should be at least as big as your n, right? So what we will do is we will have an array, a slightly bigger array. Okay, so this is my, if I say my size of the array is 100, that means this n can go up till 100. Okay, so that is the limitation, right? So if you declare the size of the array as only 10, so n user can enter anything, but this program will work only up till a value of 10, right? So for that reason, let's take this number a little higher, right? Let's take this as it memory array with the size of 100. Okay, even though we may not use it, but we can declare a larger size. Okay, only disadvantage is you are unnecessarily blocking that much amount of space. Okay, so you should be very careful when deciding the size of the array. Okay, so if you know that you are never going to enter more than 20 elements, then your size of the array should be maximum up to 20. Okay, so the size is completely based on the programmer. Okay, so you can decide and the programmer can decide based on the application, right? So once we decided this, we can do the scanf. Okay, so the user has to enter number of elements, and then after entering the number of elements, entering the number of elements, now we have to enter the value. Okay, value of elements, right? So next step is to enter the value of elements. Now for that, what we are going to do is we are going to start from 0 and we are going to go up till, this time not 10, this time we are going to go up till n, because user has said these many elements has to be there, right? So we are going from 0 till whatever the user has said. Okay, so once that is done, I am going to increment after every iteration by 1, right? So in the first iteration I will be 0, second iteration I will be 1, 2, and so on and so forth, right? Once that is done, I can take this out, take this scanf statement from there and paste it over here, right? And this statement, okay, I will just replace this by I. Okay, now just look at this, what happens over here. In the first iteration I is 0, right? So this will become a of 0, right? So in the first iteration this will run and store the value at a of 0. In the second iteration I will be incremented by 1, right? So it will become a of 1. In the third iteration it will become a of 3, and so on and so forth, right? So we need not specify all the scanfs manually, we can do it with the help of a for loop, right? So once that is done, we can just simply say, just for a hint, enter. Okay, and let's just give the user a little bit of hint as to which element he is entering. Okay, so now what happens is, after every iteration it will tell which element he is going to enter, right? So let's run it till this point and see if it works. Let's say 4 elements. So you can see here I have forgotten to add a new line over here. Let's run it again. 4 elements, and you can see it is asking asking you to enter the value of elements. So I will start one by one, and you can see it has asked for 4 elements, right? Because you have said 4 elements, right? So till here everything is fine. Now only thing left is we have to reverse the string. Now to reverse the string, what you can do is you can just write a function to reverse the string. Now or you can directly write it over here only, right? So let's run this for loop again, and let's declare another function, another array of the same size. So A will be storing the original numbers and B will be storing the reversed numbers, right? So let's run the for loop again, right? The same for loop, but this time I'm going to assign the values, right, to B, okay, but in the reverse order. So let's take B of I. So B of I is equal to, so B of I will be equal to what, right? So it will be equal to A of something, right? So if let's say A is 1, 2, 3, 4, right? So B should be 4, 3, 2, 1, right? So basically B's 0th position should be equal to A's last position, right? So basically I can write something like this. Now how do I get the last position? So I know that the string size is the array size of the array is 20, but the number of elements inside that array is n, right? Because that is what the user has entered, right? So the maximum is n, right? But in fact, if you look at the for loop, the index goes up till less than n, that means n minus 1. So it goes up till n minus 1. Like for example, if the user enters 5, right, so this index goes from 0 to 4. Okay, so always this thing has to be remembered, that the index of the first element, like for example in this case, let's say this is A and this is B, right? If this is A, this is B, then the index, this index is always 0, this is 1, this is 2, and this is 3. Okay, even though the user has entered, user may have entered n equal to 5, right? So user may have entered n equal to 4, right? So whenever user enters n equal to 4, that means there are 4 elements, right? But the index starts from 0, so it will go up from 0, 1, 2 and 3. That means n minus 1. Okay, so always remember this, whenever there is an array of size n, your last index will be always n minus 1. Okay, so n minus 1, right? So let me just clear these things out. Okay, so n minus 1. But now the problem is, this will work for the this will always copy the last digit in all the entries, right? So what I'm going to do is, I'm just going to add the index over here, right? So what happens is, in the first iteration, value of I is 0, right? So this will become b of 0 is equal to a of n is whatever is the value of n, so this will become n minus 1 minus 0, right? So basically it will be n minus 1, right? In the second iteration, okay, in the second iteration it will be so I will be 1, right? So this will become b of 1, and here it will become a of n minus 1 minus 1, so this will become n minus 2, right? So you can see the second last element is stored in the second slot, right? Next, let's take another example. So the second index 2, so in the next iteration, when this becomes, so here I will become 2, so this in total will become I minus 3, right? So similarly it will copy all the elements in the, this is the logic to copy all the elements in the reverse order, right? So once we have finished with this, our logic to reverse is ready, right? Now the only task left is to print the array, right? Now to print the array, we will be needing again a for loop, right? So let's do one thing, we will not print it again and again, right? So we will use this is where, because we have to print two arrays, a and b, so this is where we can use functions to define that array, right? So that printing job, right? So whenever I want to print, I would let's say I want to print, so I will create a function. It will not be returning anything, right? Let's call it print array, right? And it is going to accept an integer array, right? And once it is going to accept an integer array, and all you have to do is do a for loop like here, right? Now since if you only pass the array, you will not know how many elements there are, so you will also have to pass the number of elements, right? So I've also passed the number of elements, and now I can simply run that for loop here, and I'm going to print all the values from that array. Okay, so let me just do %d, and I'm going to print a of I. Okay, let me try this out and see if it works, and then we will proceed further, right? So let's print array, and let's try to print a. Okay, let's try to print a, run it. Okay, so I have not declared the variable I, so let's do that, right? Oh, I have to give n also. Okay, so let's say 4 variables, the first 2, 3, 6 and 5, and you can see it prints the array perfectly, right? So our printing work is going perfect. So only thing left is just to print original array, right? And then what I'm going to do is copy this entire contents and reversed array. Instead of a I will be doing it b. Okay, so now you can see the use of functions over here, right? So because I have declared a function, I did not write the same logic for printing a and b again and again, right? So I'm using the same function again to print both the variables, right? So let's run it, and let's say number of elements is 5, give some random values, and you can see the original array is 3, 5, 7, 6, 4, and the reversed array is 4, 6, 7, 5, 3, completely in the reversed form, right? So I could have done you can see I have missed the new lines. Okay, so I will just remove this, a little modification, and a final run. And this is my final result. Okay, so original and the reversed. Okay, I hope you have understood this program. This was the simple introduction to arrays. So we have declared an array, and we have used for loop to scan the array. Then we have used this logic to reverse the strings, reverse the elements and store it inside b. And finally we have created a function to print both the arrays, right? So this finishes with this task. We'll see you in the next task.